Hi, I'm Eric Lin, and I'm on the Cinematography podcast.
Hi, I'm Lyle Vincent. I'm on the Cinematography podcast.
This is Cinepod, the Cinematography podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image presented by Hot Rod Cameras. I'm your host, Ilya Friedman. Today on our show, I interview director Eric Lin and cinematographer Lyle Vincent about the independent film Rosemead. This is Eric's first feature film as a director after spending decades working as a director of photography.
So I've shot a lot of features, and I've been side by side with directors watching how difficult it is to make a feature. And the thing that sort of lured me out of the into the director's chair was the story. That it's just a story that I felt like had never been seen before on screen. I felt like I could be the one to tell the story, in the best way possible.
Rosemead DP Lyle Vincent has shot such films as Carry On and the popular Netflix series The Beast in Me. In this episode, you'll learn all about moving from being a cinematographer into the role of director, the creative director-DP partnership between Eric Lin and Lyle Vincent, and expressing emotion with lenses and handheld camera work for a serious and sensitive story. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsessions of the week. But first, find out what my co-host and I believe is the big news in the world of entertainment in a segment entitled Close Focus. So Ben, it is time for our Close Focus. What is going on in the world of entertainment right now?
I mean, nothing really. I mean, it's been a real slow week. Not a big deal.
Yeah. Nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about. Only Warner Brothers getting a couple of offers.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and wear my headline on my sleeve about this. This is basically the entertainment industry choosing between being punched in the face or kicked in the nuts.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Yeah,
Yeah,
go for the go for the nut punch and the kick face. Yeah, there's the either way. It's
yeah. There's no as I heard it said on one podcast. They quoted the Alien versus Predator movie slogan, which was "No matter who wins, we lose." And so
that sounds fair. That sounds very fair.
So last week it came out that Netflix was going to buy Warner Brothers, but not the networks, not the crapco, shitco as some people have been calling it, which is basically all of their television properties like Discovery Channel, CNN, HGTV, that kind of stuff. So Netflix was going to buy all of it for $87 billion. Ugh. And that sent the industry into a tizzy because Netflix Netflix's basic business model is not theatrical, and Warner Brothers movies are. And I was trying to come up with the correct metaphor, but I was like, it would be like if Monster Energy drink was buying Ambien. Like, like it doesn't line up to me that Netflix is going to change its business model to include theatrical, which is going to screw up a lot of our ecosystem. And it's not just because I'm a giant lover of going to the movies and seeing movies on the big screen, but when you think about the percentage of our business that is predicated on theatrical features, and even sometimes a loss leader of a theatrical feature that then does better on streaming because the theatrical run was kind of a marketing ploy for them, it screws up a lot of indies. It screws up the business. And one of the big things about them getting Warner Discovery is they get HBO Max. So Netflix is the number 1 streaming service. HBO Max is the number 3 streaming service. I'm of course not counting YouTube, which is actually light years ahead of everybody. But if they were to get that sounds a lot like vertical integration antitrust to me. I don't know. I'm not an antitrust lawyer, but that sure sounds like antitrust. So in response to this, the Ellisons, Skydance, who just bought Paramount, came in with a hostile basically a hostile takeover offer that basically comes out to what is it, $107 billion?
108, but who's counting?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
need to do the Dr. Evil thing when I say $108 billion.
the offer was made directly to Warner Brothers shareholders, not to the leadership of Warner Brothers, in the hopes of the essentially all of the shareholders saying, "Hey, we're going to we're going to reject this Netflix offer, and we want to go with this other one."
Yeah.
Now, it remains to be seen because there are certain machinations of this deal that we are clearly not all privy to, but there may be some reason you want to go with one or the other. Now, clearly, there is a seemingly major conflict of interest in the fact that Jared Kushner is involved with the Paramount offer.
And Donald, not to get political, everybody, but brace yourselves. Donald Trump has said that he's going to weigh in on whether or not this deal goes through, and he has the ability to do that, given that he runs the FEC and
FCC.
FCC. Yeah, no, well, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC.
SEC, yes, yeah, two different alphabet soups there together.
Yeah. So basically, and unlike a lot of other presidents, he will get personally involved and do things for the people who have most recently been nice to him.
Yeah, this is really problematic because, of course, no other company that is currently in media and entertainment should be able to purchase Warner Brothers because it creates, unfair competition.
Well, that's the thing.
Monopolistic.
So Paramount is arguing that it's not a monopoly, but obviously they have Paramount Studios. They have Paramount Plus, which is like the number 8 billion streaming service. No one, it's
in the top 10 for sure.
Yeah. But basically they want to get into the streaming business, and this would be their ticket into the streaming business. And the upside is that they have been saying that they want to, like, from the Paramount side, they want to release, I believe, 30 theatrical features. So they have a commitment to doing that. The downside is you hear about how much money they'll be able to save through synergy, which sounds really good. It sounds like there's Kumbaya and they're going to be doing like a Tai Chi in the parking lot at Warner Brothers. But you tell me what synergy secretly means.
It means a whole bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. It means a whole bunch of people are redundant and are no longer needed. They do not need to have all the same departments. Now, Netflix, because Netflix has always been a builder and not an acquirer, there's actually probably way fewer jobs being cut because they don't have redundant operations for all the things. So that Warner Brothers, and they actually said from the get-go that Warner Brothers is going to be status quo for a while. They don't want to rock the boat. They want to move in the direction that it's already going.
But I want to yes. But the CEO of Netflix, Ted Sarandos, recently said that he believes Oppenheimer and Barbie would have done just as well on streaming. And their pledge is basically to keep it status quo for now, but I think it's
exactly. For now means,
again, I go to my Monster Energy drink comparison. Like I think that they want nothing more on this planet than to put movie theaters out of business, and maybe movie theaters are slowly moving to be more of a niche product than a mainstream product. I hope not. That's not my hope. And I feel like even Netflix, with all the evidence of, like, when you see how much money they made with K-pop Demon Hunters, and we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, I find it a very frustrating position for them to take. So I kind of deflect to James Cameron when he was on Matt Bellamy's podcast, The Town, a couple weeks ago, when he was weighing in on who he thinks should get it. It was Skydance. He thinks that was the best company to acquire Warner Brothers, and I think it's specifically because they're an organization that wants to keep the art and craft and philosophy, as we talk about here, of film alive. But I also, much like Netflix getting HBO Max seems like a monopoly, Paramount getting, and Warner Brothers, Warner Mount, that sounds like a monopoly. I mean, it sounds, and for those of us like yourself and me, and most of the people who are in the business, who remember just a few years ago when Disney acquired Fox Studios, a lot of jobs went away. There was a lot of consolidation, and And synergy. I mean, like, it's just so funny. When I heard synergy, I was like, oh, synergy sounds like a nice thing. No, synergy is a lousy thing in this context. It basically means, oh, we don't need, 10 comptrollers. We only need 3 now. Goodbye, 7 comptrollers. It just means that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So I kind of feel like, again, I go back to punched in the face or kicked in the nuts. I think I'd rather get punched in the face, but
Well, it's interesting all the different people who've weighed in on it because, of course, most of the guilds and unions have immediately issued statements saying that this is a bad idea.
yeah.
IndieWire wrote a whole big piece about what this means for independent cinema and what it means for Sundance specifically, and what the landscape of buyers, how that changes, and what's going on. An executive
Does it change the independent buyers? I mean, like 824 and Neon and Magnolia are unchanged by this.
Well, they're talking specifically about like Paramount as a buyer, and certainly as Warner Brothers as a buyer, and Netflix has been less active as of lately. So changing the landscape. But they actually predict that there's going to be new alternative indie models that come to the forefront, and I actually think that's true. And they say that 2026 might be the year that we first start to see some of those new models, and we'll have to wait and see. But Kevin Mayer, who is the co-CEO of Candle Media is a media conglomerate company. It has some subsidiaries. It's backed by Blackstone Capital, and he's come out and said that the one thing you can be sure of, and it's an interesting take on this. I don't think it's too much of a crystal ball, but he's like, the one thing that you can take from this bidding war currently for Warner Brothers is that the price is just going to keep going up. You're going to see another round of bids happen. So
yeah, and I feel like in his weird perch, David Zaslav is the one who's gonna cry all the way to the bank over this. I mean, a couple of years ago, you and I had kind of like a running bet that he wasn't going to last. He's outlasting the studio. And to me, like, what's frustrating about this is like these people are lining their pockets with the history and culture of the film business. Like, they just don't seem to care. I don't know. I understand that the point of a business is to make money, but there's any number of ways that they can do that. And I feel like he has mismanaged that studio left and right and is going to mismanage it right out the door.
yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but it's all I would say that most people are talking about, certainly in Hollywood. It is the conversation that's on everyone's lips. We don't know what's going to happen. And I think everyone knows what really should happen, but what should happen is that the status quo should remain, or an outside buyer who wants to get into this space should do it.
All the outside buyers that were even brought up were all icky. It was like Saudi money, although there's Saudi money in the
Saudi
Ellison.
money in the Ellison thing. Yeah, no, it's fully backed by.
There was talk of Comcast, but Comcast now apparently has dropped out of the running. It's basically, I mean, unless a dark horse comes out of nowhere with an even more hostile takeover attempt, I don't know what you would call that, a vicious takeover attempt. Then it's going to be either Netflix or Skydance, and I would honestly put my money on Skydance, where I'm betting right now.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're gonna have to wait and see. So why don't we get to the interview with Eric Lin and Lyle Vincent?
Let's do that.
I'm joined now by Eric Lin and Lyle Vincent, the director and cinematographer of the new movie Rosemead. Welcome to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
So Rosemead is it is a powerful movie, and I have been searching for ways to describe it to people, and I kind of don't want to tell anyone anything about it. Kind of want them to have the experience of this movie. How do you describe it to people who you're hoping that they're going to go into the theater and see this? How do you describe this movie?
Rosemead features Lucy Liu, who plays a terminally ill immigrant woman who uncovers her son's growing obsession with mass violence. It's an incredible portrait of a mother's love pushed to its limits, and I think it's a role that people haven't seen Lucy take on before, and I think that I'm really excited for people to see it.
Yeah, it is completely outside of like her traditional body of work, of the type of roles that you think about Lucy Liu. How did this project come to be? How did this movie get off the ground?
Well, so I know Mynette Louie, one of the producers of the project. I should tell this story. the very first set that she ever set foot on as a PA was an NYU thesis film that I was DPing and Lyle Vincent was doing sound on. And
Right.
many years later, I won't say how many years, we came together to make this film. So Mynette started producing a lot of features, and, I shot for her a couple times. And, we talked about working together for many, many years. And she thought of me when they had optioned the script and hired Marilyn Fu to adapt it into a screenplay. So luckily, they thought of me, and I read the script, and I was completely connected with it. It felt very personal to me, and it felt like a story. I'd grown very comfortable as a DP, and I love DPing, but it felt like a story that was really, was a really urgent story that needed to be told. But it took us, 7 years to tell the story.
Yeah, for sure. So you guys went to film school together. Is that how then Lyle, you and Eric met here? And did you work on a lot of movies together?
Not a lot, no. I mean, that was way back in the day before I even knew I was going to shoot or, wanted to shoot. I was basically going into NYU, interested in directing. And, at NYU grad, you kind of do everything. You do every role on every set. You work on people's movies. You support each other. So yeah, I was doing sound on that thesis film, and I think it was on that and maybe one other project I did with Eric. And I was actually starting to get interested in the camera, and he was one of the first people that was like, kind of showing me like, okay, check this out. The RESR3. This is how you load the mag. This is where you look through and you magnify to check focus and that. So it was like a formative experience, right? Yeah. And then Eric was a year or two years ahead of me at NYU. So he kind of went his way, and I started shooting more and more. And then right when I got out of NYU, I just went right into it. And then we've always kind of kept in touch over the years, and like colleagues, sharing crew and experience and just catching up over the years. And then when this came up and he asked me, I was really honored and really excited about it. And I hadn't shot for another DP before either, which was interesting.
Yeah, I got to imagine that's a muscle you don't always get to exercise, and I think we should probably get into that, because Eric, you've spent the vast majority, I think pretty much all of your entertainment career working as a cameraman, and now making a directorial debut with Rosemead here. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in your mind here. Is this a complete shift for you? Is this a gradual thing? Why change hats?
Yeah, so I've shot a lot of features, and I've been side by side with directors, watching how difficult it is to make a feature, and the thing that sort of lured me out of into the director's chair was the story, that it was so it's just a story that I felt like had never been seen before on screen. And, again, like me and all the producers and the writer and everybody involved were so sort of like connected to the story and felt like it was such a personal story. I grew up in Southern California. I went to San Gabriel Valley. Like every weekend, my parents would drag us when we were small to go shopping, to get, go to restaurants and get food. So there was like a real sense memory when I read the script. It really brought me back to living there and, what it was like to grow up there. I grew up nearby, but feeling like, growing up in those malls and like walking around in those, strip malls, completely surrounded by, Chinese shops, Chinese pharmacies, this real like sort of small ethnic enclave, really struck me. I felt like I hadn't seen that on screen before in the way that the script had portrayed. And, I felt like it was a story I could tell truthfully and honestly. I have personal experience with friends and family who struggle with their mental health, and I could see sort of like the behaviors within the family and the emotional logic behind it, and because of that sort of personal feeling towards the script, I felt like it was something that like I could tell truthfully, and yeah, it wasn't a desire to like direct for the sake of directing. I guess it was really to like, I felt like I could be the one to tell the story, as in the best way possible. And so when it came to like DPing, there was a lot of people, when we finally got the green light, there was a lot of people asking me like, "Are you going to DP it and direct?" I was like, "No, like no way." Knowing what a DP does, like, like it would be, for me, especially a first feature, especially a feature like this, where I felt like I had to be so present and completely, eye on the ball of like every sort of emotional beat because it's so nuanced and so intricate. Like that would be a fatal mistake. And it was very, I think I had asked Lyle very early on about his availability, and there was questions, because our dates kept shifting. At one point we were going to shoot, in LA, and then we were going to shoot New York. And so when it was up in the air, I had to interview DPs, and that was like totally, man, I did not like that experience at all, because I'd been on the other side, and I love DPs, and I like every single one that I talked to. They all had incredible ideas, but when we finally settled on our schedule and Lyle became available, I was like, oh my God, thank God. Because we had that history at NYU, we had these similar references, we could talk about Boris Fruman's quotes, and, we immediately understood, what we thought were, the cinematic language. We had a very, like a foundation for shared cinematic language. So to me, it was a relief, because it was someone I wanted, when I was looking for a DP, I wanted someone who I could trust completely. I didn't want to, if I was on set starting to worrying about lensing, lighting, camera movement, like it'd be a crutch. I felt like I needed to be there. The performances of Lucy and Lawrence, especially, were so critical to it. The film, the success of the film, and their relationship. Like, I felt like if I found myself thinking about that stuff, then I knew that like my eye was not on the ball. And so, again, it was an incredible relief when Lyle became available, because then I knew I could like give it over to him. We could talk about it in prep, and I knew he would run with it, because his work is amazing, and I trusted him completely.
Lyle, I want to bring you into this conversation here because, Eric just said all these wonderful things about you. And and so I'm going to give you an opportunity here to also, polish Eric's star if you like. But the reason I bring this up is that, it's a little bit of a challenge then, for you too, because now you're working for a DP. You're working for someone who this is their job. Was this psychologically traumatic in some way for you, knowing this going in, or was this were you glad? Well, tell me about what the experience is from your perspective.
I was very glad and very felt lucky to be in this situation, because Eric said, how he kind of, he trusted me, and he did. He stepped out of the role of being a DP, and he stepped in to the director fully. But a director who is extremely visual, and has amazing references and like, amazing visual language and so much preparation. And it was just, so easy, in a way, to just step in and find this, in the script. It was, when you read the script, it's just so harrowing. It's just so emotional, and you got to do the performances justice and capture them, and find an expressive camera, but find a balance where it's not too much, where it, you never want the camera to upstage performance in any way, but always support the performance.
Yeah, it's giving nothing away here. Irene's son, Joe, Irene played by Lucy Liu, Joe played by Lawrence Shou. He's suffering from schizophrenia, and about 1.8% of Americans suffer from some form of schizophrenia somewhere on that spectrum. It's incredibly common. It's highly likely that, even if you think you don't know someone who has schizophrenia, you probably do. There's not a lot of movies about this, and it's really interesting subject matter because, you don't always just get people to the theater to see a movie about schizophrenia. This is there's a lot of heart here, even though it's a difficult subject. And I kind of want to go back even further, because you guys knew this going in. You guys knew when you're creating the look, you guys knew when you're telling the story, that you had to create a story that was going to draw people in and keep them through this whole thing on what is, could be a particularly off-putting subject to people. It's based on a true story. There's a LA Times article. I saw LA Times in the credit. Can we talk a little bit about just sort of the genesis? I know that you mentioned Mynette Louie and as the person who brought the project to you, but how does this story all come together?
You mean from the sort of like the script stage?
From the genesis, yeah. How does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Andrew Corkin and Theo James, the actor, actually had a production company, and they're the ones who had read the article, and it sort of haunted them. It stuck with them, and they weren't quite sure, was it going to be a feature, a documentary? They felt like it was a story that needed to be told, and actually, so they're the ones who approached Mynette to bring her on, and they optioned the article from LA Times, Frank Cheung's article, and then Mynette had worked with Marilyn Fu, the screenwriter, before, and so Mynette was the one who brought on Marilyn Fu to adapt it. And so after Marilyn worked with the producers, I think, for like 2 or 3 drafts, and then they started going out to directors. And that's when, I pitched on it along with, I'm sure many other directors. And, they took a leap of faith on me, and I worked with Marilyn on sort of like the final polish before we started going out to talent. And, Lucy was the top of our list. She's an icon and she's amazing. And what was even more incredible is like when we met her, she was so down to earth. And so, we really bonded over how passionate we were about this story, about the issues it raises, about our own experiences that relate to it. And she was on board from the beginning.
That's super cool. I know that Theo James, who our audience members might remember, he's been in a lot of things, but maybe a breakout role was in the Divergent series years ago.
Yep.
Has been producing. He's produced it several movies, and so that's super cool that this is all how it came together. Now, getting into then the way this movie looks, and I know that that's why a lot of people listen to this podcast, is they really want to hear about the nitty gritty about the look of the project. How did you guys come up with this style? It's a little bit of a period piece, but not really. It's contemporary. So where does the look of Rosemead come from?
I mean, it was really about finding the subjective camera and the expressiveness, like I mentioned before. Like another NYU alum that we looked at, movie that deals with schizophrenia, is a movie called Clean Shaven. It's really unique way of portraying mental health, schizophrenia specifically, in the use of close-up and the use of subjectivity and POV shots, as well as sound. So it's really which I think Eric really found really well, is what, to tell the story is through the sound, sound married to the image. But yeah, we really wanted to find that camera where it draws you into the performance, into their head, and into their unique perspective. We wanted to, with Joe's episode specifically, we really wanted to find, because like the camera in other parts of of the film is more about capturing the performance, the moments, a little more classical. But when we're there, we're more handheld, and we're using these special lenses, these portrait lenses, where everything is kind of blurry around the edges, and it's just the center is in focus. And went a little harsher and more dynamic with the lighting, and use the POV angles and the extreme close-ups. Another 2 movies we really looked at was Mother and Black Swan for inspiration. I would say Mother with the, Eric can talk more on but it's more like the character, obviously. And, the way it was shot with the profiles, specifically, which we wanted to play with a lot on this, as well as playing shots in profile, longer lens. And then when you come around.
And that, and like Lyle was saying, that extreme subjectivity part of that is also like the limited POV of each of them, right? Both Irene and Joe are the same house, but they're sort of uncovering secrets and lies that they sort of are telling each other to protect each other. And the unfolding of that mystery kind of happens, we learn about it through their perspective. And so it sort of heightens that tension of both like not only their isolation from like the larger community, but also that sort of suspense about what's happening. When she's watching him and she's not totally sure what's happening with him, we learn with her what's going on with him. All these things that sort of happen outside the frame that she brings us to. And so, and especially like, as Lyle was talking about with the schizophrenic episodes, me and Lawrence, the actor, did a lot of research about schizophrenia, and like on YouTube, it's amazing that like some people actually will record their psychotic episodes. They're as a way to sort of share about it and share it and like demystify what it is. And there's different levels of schizophrenia too. They talk about how they start to feel the psychosis come on, and they're starting to struggle to stay present, and they describe that process, and that was helpful for us to think about how to represent Joe. He's trying to stay present, he's trying to stay focused, but all these senses are sort of like crashing in on him. And for me, that portrait lens sort of gave that feeling. It's not that he's in an altered state, it's that he's trying to hold on to like this reality that's very like sort of a fine line between about to fall apart. And then part of our research with schizophrenia was like when people have these psychotic episodes, not just the senses that they're receiving, it's like feelings that are associated with it. They might be talking about, might be hearing voices, about something, but they describe how they feel a sense of doom or, just total fear, and the voices might be saying something totally different, but they have this extreme feeling of like, impending danger or something. And so how do we give that feeling, and so it's through like both Lyle's incredible, handheld work, and like sound design to try to give this, this total sensation of what he might be going through and the torment of it, so that we understand that he's struggling to stay present. And, hopefully it helps draw audiences in to like, feel like they're behind him for that process.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because there's a very uniform look to Rosemead. It feels like even when you're in these different moments and exploring Joe's headspace, it doesn't ever feel like it's detached or removed from the rest of the story. It still feels very grounded. There's only really a couple of moments that really jump out to me as something that feels different. And I think you used it for really great creative effect. And I'm thinking about sort of the longer lens, almost voyeuristic shots inside of the motel. And really the sort of like slow motion, sort of like happy memory stuff that's going on. Can you talk specifically a little bit about that? Because that is used with great effect. It is on one level might seem like a mundane memory, but this memory is this time is replays for Joe over and over again and has so much emotion like attached to it. Can you talk? It's almost like a little bit of release too. It's like you kind of want to live in that happy moment as the audience member. You want to experience more of that. You want to go deeper. You want Joe to have some sort of catharsis or release or something from that time. Can you talk about how those shots of the motel sort of become this undercurrent that flows through the movie?
It was always the conception. This memory is sort of like a very, as you said, it's a very loaded memory for Joe because it's very bittersweet. It's sort of the last time they were happy, but it's also it's almost like I always imagine as like trapped in amber. It's this thing he's always trying to get back to, right? It's this perfect happy moment that he almost can't get back to, and he's trying to. We have a scene where he's at the motel, and. One of my initial creative ideas to both, they pitched both to Lyle and our production designer was that sequence should be the warmest in the entire film. Every other sort of warm color should be some sort of bastardized version or degraded version of that sort of warmth. And we, in the color grade, we sort of we're able to like really dial that in. But again, giving it that idea that, like you're saying, is this memory that's very like trapped in amber, that's inaccessible, but something that you always reach back to. But then there's the moment where he does sort of pierce through where, when he's talking to the therapist And, initially the visual strategy is that we're sort of like always outside that window, like, peeking in on it, and it's like inaccessible. And we actually push the camera through the window, and then suddenly you're inside, and then, you sort of experience it as Joe experiences it, his memory of it. And so it's, we created these sort of like visual metaphors to help sort of augment his psychological state, there's no reason his memory would be outside the window, but for us, it was a visual tool to show how he's always trying to get into it and always like not quite reachable. And they're out of focus, they're in slow motions. It's this really like, seductive imagery, that he can't access. And then when he does, he actually has some sort of emotional breakthrough, that he's actually able to be in the room and actually be able to be in that moment. And it's not, he's not fighting everything else that, comes with that memory.
Lyle, do you want to get into this as well, too? It feels like such a, I don't want to say necessarily a climax of the movie, but it's something that we get fractures of, several times, and it ends up becoming this really sort of like important part of the movie. And it's interesting because there's no like, there's really not a lot of like any sync dialogue or anything. It's a memory, but it keeps playing back. How, in your conversations with Eric leading up to this, it could very easily just be 1/8 of a page. It's like, family happy inside of motel, but you have to now turn this into something that is going to be really important and thematic for the whole movie. How do you do that?
The thing about the motel was it's like, finding the right location and playing with the surreal quality of it, the dreamlike quality of it. And, it's one of the few locations we actually shot in California. Mm. Basically, the whole movie is shot in New York. And, other establishing stuff and that, but it was all about finding that motel and that actual place and seeing the surrounding and like, finding that kind of faded quality of the location and the colors and the lighting, and then the camera angles. We have the drone, we have the long lenses, like you said, or the profile shots, or shooting through glass and reflections. It's like all kind of culminating of this surreal dreamlike quality and his inner state of this memory, which is so central to the character in the story.
Yeah, and the opening shot of the film is, I think it's the only shot I actually storyboarded, and it's there's several shots that sort of like came very close to what I imagined, but that was almost exactly what I imagined, where we kind of tilt down on the city and going on this one motel room, and so finding that right location. This one actually sat on the hill. I think it's up in Monterey Park, so that we were able to get this incredible cityscape. And we shot it. I think we shot that drone shot like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So the city was like, asleep. And so, we were able to light up that one window, and you feel like they're the only people in the world, as you sort of descend on that that room and that window. But the location is completely key. And, we had always imagined that would be, exterior walkways, like all that sort of thing was stuff that we expected. But we had an incredible location scout who went around to like the various motels and did drone shots to even, because he understood, like, once I showed him the storyboard, he would like, he had a drone and he just like buzzed around trying to find like to show us what the aerial views would be like. And some of them, some of these motels were on super busy corners that never really got quiet, but this one was sort of further up in the hills and more isolated, so we could get this sense of them being completely alone. Location completely determines so much of it.
Well, if you guys aren't storyboarding, I'm sure you're shot listing it. Can you talk a little bit about your process then of finding your frames and figuring out, how you're going to break down these scenes, how many shots, how do you guys, what's your relationship like this? How do you guys figure this stuff out?
Well, I did force us to shot list the entire film, even though we didn't have a lot of locations locked. But I found, even when I'm a DP, like it helps me because with the DP, we're talking about the emotional world of the characters, right? So it's less about shots, right? Like, yes, you're writing down like medium shot here, shot, reverse shot, over the shoulder. But you start to talk about the emotional subtext, right? Should it be clean singles? Why? right? Should it be 2-shot? Why? You know, like there were certain things that were important to me very early on, like when we first see Irene and Joe, that they should always be in a 2-shot and they should sort of move through people. You know, there's sort of like this island, you know, and then when they encounter other people, they sort of break that facade because now they have to put on a different sort of face as they, you know, talk to whoever, the friends or the family or, you know, people in the community. So there were certain like core visual ideas that, you know, we would jot down in the shot list, and, you know, we didn't know our locations then. But once we got locations, we would photo board, you know, like everything, Artemis, and I would put those into the shot list. You know, like once we sort of found frames that we liked from like our location scouts, and we would lock a location, and sometimes we would revisit, you know, as much as we could, you know, like we scout. Okay, that's the best candidate. We would go back and then try to like photo board as much as possible and see what's possible. And I would put that into our shot list so that, you know, obviously on the day, everything's like chaos, but those two things are sort of what's key is like you found this frame that you think works emotionally. At least we responded to it on the location scout. We can, we weren't always slaves to it. But then you also talked about what the emotional key, you know, core of that scene should be. You know, what is that moment within that scene that we're really trying to make sure we structure the whole scene around, no matter, you know, what changes on the day. So for me, that was like a super important process, just to like walk through, you know, exactly what those sort of key emotional moments are within each scene and understand that going in, so that, you know, we're not discussing that on the day, you know, but it's because we already discussed it, but the shots might change, you know, the blocking might change, actors will have other ideas, but, you know, we talked about this one thing, and that's what's going to help us to, you know, formulate an idea for that scene.
Lyle, do you feel freedom not being married to storyboards that way, and working off of like the photo board or mood board? Absolutely. Or the different thing? So yeah, how does that impact what you do?
Yeah, I mean, for a movie like this, especially, I don't think being too locked into exactly framing and shot selection is ideal. You know, I think exactly what Eric said. Like, just like, you know, we know what the scene is about. We know, you know, the intention behind it, you know, what he wants to get out of that scene, you know, emotionally, you know, what he wants to see visually in the storytelling. And, you know, then we just be very sensitive on the day and be able to, you know, it's like we have that, you know, backbone, but on the day we see what's going to happen on the set, with the, like you said, with the actors, they're going to do something special, and we have to, it's our job to capture that and find that. And, you know, and sometimes, especially like on this with the constraints, it's like we could only look in a certain direction, you know, it's like,
yeah,
which is kind of freeing in a way too. Cause it's like,
right.
You know, cause we're shooting in New York in the middle of winter when there's like blizzards outside, and we're shooting Los Angeles, you know? So it was like, sometimes that's freeing to have those constraints, you know? Sometimes it is. It's like, you know, you find your way through it, and you give yourself those constraints. You find the way out, and the creative process. Yeah.
What I think is particularly clever about how you guys made this movie work is that we're always a little bit inside of Joe. It feels like we're always a little bit inside of Joe, no matter what's going on. He's at the pool, he's on the street. You're even if you're like, ostensibly, this is you know, Lucy Liu's movie. This is her movie. But at the same time, we're always in Joe. We're always thinking about Joe, and I feel like that's. I mean, Lucy Liu's character, Irene's got all this other stuff going on as well. But I feel like no matter what, Joe ends up becoming the focus. He ends up being the focus always because there's something unpredictable there. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided that this movie was going to have this element of unpredictability, and where the lensing, the framing or the lighting, like maybe it enhances this, or you could say I'm totally wrong and off base here. If so, tell me, like, you know, tell me about that. But that's what stuck with me.
No, I think you're absolutely right. You know, in the script, it was always written as a two-hander. Like, we were always going to be with Joe, and then we'll be with Irene as things sort of start to descend. And, you know, we wanted very early on to make sure that the audience cared for Joe and they were behind him. They really like were pulling for him. We hint early on at some of his struggles at school, and we really want the audience to feel like he's trying. He's trying to be strong for his mom. He's trying to go back to school and show her that he's strong and that he's getting better even if he's not. And which leads to him sort of hiding his condition from her, how severe it is, the severity of it from her. And that's why sort of like some of the films that Lyle had mentioned earlier were such touchstones for us. Is like we're like Black Swan, we're so subjective with Irene, and similar to that film, as sort of like the world unravels, we're with her as she sort of like sees these things sort of like deteriorate, and it leads to that sense of, again, isolation, right? Like that she's alone, that she has no one else to turn to. She's hiding these things from the community, but it also gives a sense of like she doesn't know. I shouldn't give it away. But when things become more erratic, that sense of unpredictability is absolutely part of it, and part of her worry and part of her fear. And being so close to her and limiting that sort of like field of view, I think only enhances that. And so for me, like one of the more powerful cuts is when she's on her journey, and then we cut to this wide shot of San Gabriel Valley, and she's alone, and you just feel the vastness of that. But it's because we've built this whole film where we're so close and tight and intimate and subjective with them that when you do cut wide, it has this power. And I always found that like breathtaking when we do cut to that. It always like hits me, is because of like we were able to like be so close and intimate and subjective with them in the beginning, and so I think that subjectivity sort of does like so many things. That intimacy too. It helps us sort of root for Joe and feel for him, and so that when he starts to pull away and when his psychosis starts to get more severe, then when we're with Irene, we start to feel how helpless she feels and how isolated she feels. And it sort of adds to that sort of suspense, I think.
Lyle, what talk about your contribution to this, because we're almost talking about like in some ways things that would feel like editing choices, but not really, because if you don't have these ingredients to start with, the editor's got nothing. You've got to give the editor these pieces to put it all together. Can you talk a little about the framing, or how you're trying to create this maybe this existential sense of dread of what's going on with Joe, even when we're with Irene?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, they're these two characters. It's like mother and son. They're almost one, It's like one affects the other, and you always feel the absence of the other one in the frame in a way, or when they're together, like what Eric mentioned earlier too, when we do two shots and then later we have singles. It's like we always play into that psychology of these two characters that share so much. They are almost one. The low angles, as I mentioned earlier too, the profiles, the kind of abstractness, where it's just enough where it doesn't take you out of the performance, but it's enough to feel a little bit of the edge as well, and a little bit of the distance, a little bit of the isolation. Yeah. And then of course the special lenses that we did for Joe's episodes,
Yeah, it's all super effective. It really is. I want to shift back into the DP as director thing. So Eric, I don't know if you ever entirely answered the sort of like your future prospects though. Now, are you a director now? Are you a DP now? Are you a hyphenate? I know that Wally Pfister will go back and forth and do some of both. So tell me what's next for you. Is it more directing? Is it more shooting?
I think I'm waiting to see. Like the focus has been getting Rosemead out in the world and getting it seen. We're having our theatrical release this Friday in New York, December 5th at AMC Lincoln Center, and then in LA for a week on the 12th. I'm not sure. I love shooting. Like I shot a Netflix series in India right after we wrapped post on this called Delhi Crime. Mm-hmm. And it was a joy to go back to shooting. But if the reason I came to do this project is because I cared about this story so much, and I felt connected with it so deeply. And I hope to find another story that I feel the same about, that I would want to tell, as a director, tell the story as a director. So I'm open to it, and I'm curious what will happen in the future.
So you guys have mentioned several times the portrait lenses. I definitely got the feeling that was more of a spice rather than the main ingredient of this movie. The movie is shot primarily on anamorphic lenses. Lyle, can you jump in about how you guys made the choice? Were the portrait lenses really just for certain effects? Did you find, you've got spherical and anamorphic intercutting together. How did this work out for you guys?
Yeah, so I've always been a big fan of the anamorphic format throughout my career. And this was kind of an opportune moment because it was like coming out of the strikes, and I had done a smaller movie in LA during the strikes, one of these like waiver movies, and there was nothing else shooting. So Panavision had like their whole, all these lenses that are usually very hard to get. So it was like, C series, E series, and this. But so we then going into Rosemead, I kind of carried this set of E series along, which I thought were kind of just right for this project because they have just enough expressiveness, but like not so much that it's distracting. So it's not like something like a Crystal Express or something where it's like just wild. They're like a little more controlled. And then I always find too with the format that it's like, especially in close-ups with performances, is that they somehow just draw you in to the character and the performance, and even though you have this wide frame, it's still somehow it's intimate somehow, and how it kind of just brings this three-dimensionality and this kind of bring the foreground forward.
Yeah. They're really special lenses. They haven't made them in decades now. The E series, at least in my memory from back when I used to shoot and stuff, it always felt to me too like you need a little bit of a deeper stop. Those lenses were asking for a little bit of a deeper stop rather than wide open. Was that your experience as well too? Did you try to add a little bit more light working them versus other lenses?
I do like that, and I don't like kind of like an excessive shallow depth of field either. Especially, unless we're going for that special effect with like portrait lenses, it's like more like when you're just telling the story. I feel like you still want to feel the environment. You still, you want to see the relation to the environment, and have just enough shallow depth that it's like you're drawn into the subject, but it's not pulling attention to itself.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. It's like I feel like even though there's separation and stuff that's going on, and the anamorphic adds some extra funkiness, it's you guys aren't playing it up. You guys aren't playing up the funkiness of the anamorphics. You guys are keeping it. You're keeping it. I want to say, I'm not going to say sterile, but you're keeping it more, I would say, normal for a lot of the times. People really try to lean into a lot of these effects. Yeah. Was this conscious on your part? Did you really want to make sure that the anamorphic wasn't like screaming, this is anamorphic?
Exactly. Yeah. I want it to be restrained and supportive of just what we're capturing, that performance. And then when we do the super subjective feel of when we're going to portrait, then there's more of a contrast to that.
For sure. One of the sequences early on in this movie is a driving sequence where you see Joe and his friends in a car. It's very, we haven't had much time with Joe really to get into his headspace at all before this. Can you talk about that sequence?
This film takes place in Rosemead, California, where the story is set, where the actual events happened. But because of actor availability and tax incentives, we ended up shooting about 4 weeks in New York and 1 week in LA. And LA was all the exteriors, but New York was all interiors. And I would say that part of my experience as a DP that came into play was how painful it is to shoot, car driving shots, dialogue. The amount of work it goes in to get like those 4 angles inside a car where, you're limited all the time to the same 4 angles because of how difficult it is. I cut all of that out of the script. We reset scenes in different places because I was like, we're not going to spend the time on this because our schedule is so tight. And our time is better spent getting, way better material, in other scenes than devoting like an entire day to get this tiny piece of scene. So we had cut it out completely from the script. But in New York, you need to spend 1 day on a stage to get the tax incentive. And just out of luck, I don't remember how this happened, Lyle, I don't know if you remember, but a friend of ours who's a DP, Justin Lee, runs a LED volume stage in Brooklyn for Be Electric. And it ended up being that his stage was free and they were interested in doing more car stuff. And ours was sort of like a great guinea pig. So they worked out a deal. He was able to like swing us an incredible deal. And so we were able to reset that scene inside the car because originally it was going to be at a house or something, another interior, essentially. But the original conception of the scene was a driving scene, and I had taken it out because I was like, we're not going to drive for just this piece of dialogue for this bit of scene. But it lucked out, and when that stage became available, we switched. We were in the middle of production, and we switched courses. We're like, oh, we could totally do a driving scene. It'd be awesome. It's gonna be so much easier. We can. We knew immediately how this would be way more creative and save us way more time and ease and make it way more effective and give us scope too, because so much of the film we were having to set interiors. We were very much driven by that idea of having to do all these interiors in New York and limiting how much we saw out the windows because it's winter, so the idea that we could actually get plates that were, set inside the valley and show off the valley. And then, down the line, 2 weeks down the line, me and Lyle went out there and got a bunch of B-roll of cars driving through San Gabriel Valley to tie it all together. Just gave us like sort of way more scope than I had originally hoped. And so the fact that became available to us as an indie film was amazing, and Lyle, you've shot on volumes before, and I think once that came up, it became immediately clear how amazing of an asset it would be for our film.
It was just a great opportunity for, like what he said, on a small movie like this to have access to that. I mean, I think between Panavision with those lenses and then the stage, Justin Lee with his stage, and it just brought a lot to a little movie,
Lyle, you've been working on a lot of bigger stuff lately, including The Beast and Me and Carry On. I know you've been doing some big projects. And Eric, you're used to working with on larger shows as well too. Can you talk about moving into, like, I don't want to say going backwards, but doing a small movie? This is a small movie. I mean, you've mentioned how, it's an indie production and, you tax incentives and having to shoot on different coasts for different things. So tell me about that difference. Tell me about the difference between, doing the large Netflix project and an indie like this.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm curious to hear Lyle's perspective, actually. I don't know if I ever asked you this. But, for me, what was an incredible creative exercise was taking that experience and how to apply it to this sort of film. I think, no matter like the scale, you realize sort of the problems and, and the challenges that are attached to having that kind of scale. And so understanding kind of like the scope of our film, Rosemead, and how small it was, and how to maximize kind of what we were trying to achieve, for me, was the most important thing. And so I was constantly looking at the schedule with that in mind. If I simplify this technically, it'll give us more time to explore this visually, on set shooting. And, having, again, it's totally that thing of having the experience of having shot scenes in cars or, like the pool, even though we set a film in a pool, water stuff, like knowing how much time that takes and how to strategize around it and making sure, like in the schedule, in the prep, that we are maximizing the time for the actors, for the story, and having our time on set that will give us time to explore and get better stuff. You could aim to be super ambitious with your visuals and your schedule and try to get, whatever, some elaborate sequence. But if you're, robbing your schedule, like performance driven scenes to achieve these things, then, you have to really keep the scope of the film in your head to make sure you're focusing on what the right thing is. So the experience of working on larger projects was sort of helpful in just like determining, like with a scalpel knife, like what's actually essential and how can we devote as much time to what's essential, and not getting lost in things that I could see that would bog us down technically, and it may not add to what we were trying to achieve in the film in the end.
It's refreshing doing a film like this after doing large projects in a way. It's it's going back to our roots. It's going back to our film school roots, and being on up on a small set with just a few people, like-minded people, creative people, artists, and being, like I said earlier too, like sometimes the restraints sometimes make you more creative. Whereas on something bigger, it's great. You have all this money, and there's never enough time or money on even on the biggest thing. There's always there's always a challenge on every shoot. But when you have more resource and you can just throw money at things, or have VFX fix things, or this or that, sometimes you get a little complacent, and you're not as quick on your feet, or as creative, you could say, as when you're in a very restricted area, or a place in production where you only have so little time, or you can't look this direction, you can only look this way, or you what have you. It's it can make you lean and mean, and then you can take that experience and then apply that to stuff that you're doing later. I mean, that's the kind of beauty of it, is one kind of feeds the other, and it's kind of a loop. But yeah, I just love that. We went back with so many people that we knew from NYU back in the day, and a New York independent indie crew who are used to making these soulful projects on budgets, and in the middle of winter in New York, and then you see these unbelievable actors with these performances in these movies, they're which is a real treat. It's a real it's a gem.
Well, I think it's really important that nobody burns bridges with the PAs from film school, because clearly they could be
hire you later.
That's right.
100%. It's a good example.
Be nice to your PAs, absolutely.
That's right.
I think that's a really great place for us to leave it. Gentlemen, the movie is called Rosemead. It is going to be in New York this week, and in LA the week following. If you're hearing the sound of my voice, please check your local listings to find out where Rosemead is playing, because I don't think there is any sort of streaming or any information about that yet. You guys are all still up in the air. Gentlemen, is there a place in the world on social media or something like that you also lurk and hang out? Can people track you down somewhere outside of this movie in the real world?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm at Hold the Frame, all one word. But we also have a Rosemead account, and it's at Rosemead Film, all one word. And you can check there for any updates on screenings and our release.
Lyle, how about you? Is there a place that people can find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram too. It's at Lyle Vincent. And I have my website, lylevincent.com.
Terrific. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks again for having us, Ilya. It's a real pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so that was Eric Lin and Lyle Vincent. Thanks so much for being on the show. Looking forward to seeing how Rosemead does, and seeing what you guys do next.
All right.
All right, so Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about our pet obsessions. What's going on in your world this week?
Well, lots of stuff, but the thing that's been kind of the big conversation on social media and stuff like that is some stuff that Quentin Tarantino said. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm a huge Tarantino fan. Just this week, I went and saw the Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2 mushed together. Tarantino's a huge inspiration. However, on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, and you can find the audio easily online, Quentin Tarantino decided to say horrible things about, of all people, Paul Dano. And it was in the context of him talking about There Will Be Blood and why There Will Be Blood isn't, in his top 10 or whatever, that, he thinks it's a great movie, but Paul Dano ruins it for him. And then he went on to trash Matthew Lillard, trashing two working actors. Paul Dano, to my knowledge, has said nothing. Matthew Lillard kind of fired back and basically just said, it bums me out, and, I have nothing but respect for Quentin Tarantino. I love his work, but the only thing that I can think of as to why he would have said this is he's on Bret Easton Ellis's podcast. And Bret Easton Ellis is, a famous writer, and I'm going to say famous edgelord. Like, Bret Easton Ellis is an edgy man. And he likes to do edgy things. And I feel like Tarantino sometimes when he goes on these things kind of code switches. And, he's like trying to, if someone came on our podcast, they're trying to impress us. If you're on somebody's podcast, you're trying to impress them. And maybe he was trying to be all edgy like Bret Easton Ellis. I want to cut him all the slack in the world, again, because I think he's a freaking genius. But also, firstly, it spawned as many as I've counted so far, about 5 YouTube think pieces about Paul Dano in There Will Be Blood that has made me because I don't really think about There Will Be Blood all the time. It's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. It looks great. It's got some great performances and stuff. Hadn't really thought about it. And suddenly I'm like watching all these think pieces and it's making me want to go reevaluate There Will Be Blood and watch it again. Specifically watching it for Paul Dano's performance. I've always thought Paul Dano is a pretty good actor when he's cast in the right thing. I just recently rewatched Looper. He's in that. He's great. He's a solid actor. But I also want to really come to the defense of Matthew Lillard. Matthew Lillard, who came to prominence in Scream, the first Scream, is one of those actors who gets the assignment every fucking time. And, a movie that I don't love that he's in is Scooby-Doo, where he plays Shaggy. He nails Shaggy. He nails Shaggy to the wall. He is fully committed. He works his ass off, and you'll even see him in smaller stuff like in Life of Chuck, where he just kind of turns up in a scene or two, and he always brings his A game. And I just can't figure out why anyone would take a cheap shot at him, which to me, Paul Dano's a movie star, and it's not that Matthew Lillard isn't a movie star, but I think of Matthew Lillard as he's more of a supporting player. He's like a middle class.
He's done some great television. He's done some great television over the years.
He totally has, but he's like a workaday actor. This is like a guy who makes a living working as an actor, and he probably doesn't live in a giant mansion. He probably lives in a nice house, and it's just why fuck with that guy? Why would you even, Paul Dano is a big movie star, and I'm sure that, he can cry into his millions of dollars. But also, I don't understand why you would say that. And again, watching some of these think pieces on YouTube, where the whole point is that Daniel Day-Lewis's Plainview character is bombastic and mean and direct and a dick, and Paul Dano's character is by design supposed to come across as meek but be just in every way as scheming as the Daniel Day-Lewis character. And to me, that's freaking cool. I feel like for the most part, the town has kind of come to the defense of these people, and in a way, it's actually kind of raised their profile. Where it's hey, Tarantino, tell everyone I suck too, because then it'll get everyone talking about me again. I don't want to poke the bear and be mean to Quentin Tarantino because I think he's awesome, but I just don't understand. I just don't understand why this happened. I don't understand why you would say these things about, of all actors, these two guys too. I'm sure that if they had picked another actor, say someone who I'm not going to name names, but someone we could both agree was overrated or sucked, I still don't think it's cool. You're a big director. Don't cast him in your films. Who gives a shit?
I agree. It's really, this sort of thing does happen. It does happen from time to time. Someone badmouths someone else, and I don't know exactly what maybe the backstory or their is the thing that goes into this. But we all have our preferences. I'm not going to out who one of your preferences are.
Oh, you know who they are. Yeah.
I know exactly.
I know exactly who you're thinking about.
But it's someone who is your kryptonite and used to be a waiter who even waited on you one time. So there, I don't think I gave
at Crocodile Cafe in Burbank, if anyone wants to figure that out. Anyway, go on.
But yeah, I have my particular ones too. There's particular actors that are not my favorite. But also the thing about Paul Dano and Matthew Lillard is they seem pretty non-offensive to me. They seem like pretty non-offensive actors too. So it's like,
yeah,
it really does.
I literally don't know anything about either of their personal lives. Like, I don't know if they're married, who they're married to, gay, straight, political leanings, anything. You know why? Because they're just doing their job and minding their own business.
Yeah. It's this one's a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, definitely living rent free in my brain this week. How about yourself, Ilya? What's your week all about?
So Christopher Nolan's got a movie coming out called The Odyssey.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. It's got a little bit of attention because
it's based on a Garfield book, right? Like Garfield at Large.
It was definitely one of the Garfields. No. Of course, it's based on the Odyssey from Homer. So also famously, of the Iliad. So the Odyssey has this incredible cast, and it is probably the most hotly anticipated movie of 2026. They started pre-sale tickets a full year in advance of the release. You can't buy a ticket. They all sold out all the pre-release. They are going to release more tickets as it gets closer and do another pre-sale. But it was just announced that the first 6 minutes of the movie, the 6-minute prologue, is now going to start screening at certain 70 millimeter IMAX screens around the country, ahead of Sinners and One Battle After Another, which is starting on Friday. And then anyone who goes to see Avatar 3 in IMAX will get to see the entire full 6-minute prologue as well.
Wow. So he did that with Tenet. He released like the first sequence from Tenet like a little bit before the movie came out.
God, I'm ignorant of that. I totally missed that. I didn't see that. But
our mutual friend Janelle Riley had sent me a link, and she was like, "Check it out." And I watched it. I'm like, "This is awesome." And then I saw the movie, and I'm like, "I'm confused."
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people confused by Tenet. But anyway, for a movie that's not going to come out until fall of 2026, kind of interesting. And I don't know what kind of memory people will have. Maybe perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps it's just to get people talking about it. In the long lead up. Undoubtedly, there'll probably be some more dribs and drabs of stuff. But I think it's about like getting people to pre-buy their tickets and say, yes, I want to go see this in a theater. And it is a ridiculous cast. Anyone who I don't want to go and list everyone, but go and Google or IMDb The Odyssey and take a look at that cast. It's like there's everybody's in that thing. It's great.
And interestingly enough, they shot the whole thing on Pixel Vision, so that'll be fun to see. That'll be fun to see in IMAX.
No, it is an IMAX movie, and you will not see any Pixel Vision in this.
How long before he and Hoyda get Kodak to make like even bigger film stock and make a camera that's like basically shooting 8x10 film negative?
That's not going to happen. It's just not practical, and it's absolutely not going to happen. And you wouldn't have any way to play it back. You'd have to scan it. It'd be a whole thing. No, just no. I did see a really cool wet glass, like 18x24 camera image that was like 100 years old the other day. That was super cool. I'd never seen one that large, but yeah, pretty fun. Anyway, I'll totally off topic. Ben, that just about does it for this episode. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
You can find me at benrock.com, just the way it sounds. Check out my reel, look up my socials, all that stuff. Find me on LinkedIn. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com, doing some studio scouting the next couple of days. There's a couple of people who are talking to us about building studio spaces, YouTube studio spaces, educational studio spaces. So yeah, I'm in LA doing that this week.
Nice. Yeah, I can tell you're in LA because I can see your amazing screening room in the background.
Yeah, I really wanted to do a sort of like friends and family screening here, but not able to do it this trip.
All right, so Ilya, who do we need to thank this week as opposed to all other weeks?
This week, we'll thank Alana Cody. Alana Cody, our producer. She is making the show happen. She is editing the show. She's putting it together. She's organizing our crazy schedules over the next month or so during award season, and basically turning this into a program that you can watch wherever you can get into YouTube or listen to or watch on podcasts. Like I think we're going to start having video on our Spotify now too. So
Oh,
if
nice.
people want to watch us there, that there'll be that option. We also have to thank Kay Zalatracci, who I think I'm supposed to see possibly like tomorrow. So I'm trying to work that out. And Kay Zalatracci, he recorded all the music. He composed all the music of this episode. And you should definitely look him up at Music by Kay's and Kay's Labs on YouTube.
Excellent. Do you want me to take us out?
Why don't you take us out?
Thanks for tuning in. This has been Cinepod, the cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory at hotrodcameras.com. Watch and subscribe to our show on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and interact with us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn, but not X. Don't do that. Thanks for tuning in.